You're lucky I'm not going to show you boring games today. Lev Alburt did not play boring chess.
He's very resourceful, and he doesn't give up easily. He has all kinds of inner resilience, and he can fight, and you think you have him when you don't.
You know, it's amazing what he did for U.S. chess. I think he did more for U.S. chess than any other grandmaster except for Bobby Fischer. I mean, that's my personal opinion. Definitely in the last 35, 40 years.
Told them to take him to a police station. And when he went into the police station, he told them, you know, he was defecting. And luckily, there was a very experienced captain of the police that knew what to do. It entailed a ride in a police car to the U.S. Embassy. The policeman kept motioning to him, saying "Mach klein," Mach klein, which means make small in German. And what he wanted him to do was get his head down so he wouldn't be shot through the window. That's how dangerous it was. So this was a pretty spectacular escape. And it was the only one. It was the only escape by a GM from the Soviet Union.
Lev was born in 1945. He defected in 1979. He became a U.S. citizen in 1985. He was first board, on the U.S. team at Malta in 1980. We came in fourth. That was a very powerhouse year for the Soviet Union. They had two world champions on there. Lev had to contend with Karpov. So that was a tough tournament, but, they could hold their heads high. On first board, Lev finished with a plus score. So, that's always difficult to do.
Lev Alburt was one of a group of immigrants to the United States who really helped enhance the world of chess there in the 1970s and 80s. He wasn't just active as a player, he is also, active politically in U.S. chess. He also was an author and became really well known as a teacher. And so he holds a really special role as kind of, influencing these different realms of chess where some people just excel in one or the other. He's made kind of a name for himself as a teacher to people who are kind of captains of industry.
Yeah, Lev is a kaleidoscope of ideas. Certainly it begins in the opening, but he's a great middle game player too.
I played him once when I was an IM, and I had black. I think it was the New York Open, and I lost. And when the game ended, he sacked the exchange, and then eventually his position was too good. And I thought it was really complicated. I didn't know who was better, and I was confused. And when I showed the game to my coach, he went, "Well, you're just getting crushed the whole game." And I was like, "Oh." And then I looked with an engine many years later, and that was correct. So I didn't understand the game at all. I just got blown off the board. However, not as badly as a couple of the games we're going to look at today.
All I could tell you is that if you're championing the Ukraine, you're a hell of a chess player. Ukraine is, a real chess hotbed, just like Latvia. It's not all Russia.
Lev has a fantastic history of how he got into chess, what chess was like at that time period, where chess went. The other thing that really shows where he is in terms of greatness of other players is that if you look back at who he beat in those championships, he beat Larry Christensen and Joel Benjamin and Paul Benco in 1984 and 85. In 90, he beat Yasser Seirawan. Every single one of those players is in the United States Chess Hall of Fame too. So it's not that it was, any kind of fluke system. He was a great player playing among great players.
It was incredible how good he became as an author, as an organizer of material, and of course the brilliant curriculum that are in his books. It was my first experience, I think my only experience, working very closely with someone who's undoubtedly a genius.
I think it was like the 87 U.S. Open, like Arthur Biscayr said, he's here, he's there, he's everywhere, because he was trying to fit in all of his duties as like a member of the policy board as well as being a player.
So all of these things combined, I think, helped me a lot, and all the credit goes to Lev. And of course, Lev is instrumental also in building up American chess, because it's only through his effort that his students basically financed the World Chess Championships in United States. We had 2 U.S. championships in New York as a result of Lev's involvement.
So I read your questions, so you can ask them in any order you like.
Okay.
Because you can ask any questions. So please go ahead whenever you're ready. Okay, I learned chess when I was 5 years old. It was kind of normal childhood illness. For a couple of weeks I was in bed. So my aunt taught me chess. Just moves. She wasn't really a chess player. She knew moves. Then later my dad, who was a good chess player, by today's standards would be like good B player. He taught me serious chess, like real chess, like playing chess with a purpose. And it's how my chess career started. I had several chess coaches. Can mention several, but probably their names would say little to the viewers.
Well, for the Lev Alburt article, the James Bond seemed like a natural because his escape from the Soviet Union, the old Soviet Union, of course, happened during the height of the Cold War in '79. It was dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. There was the same year, I believe it was a rower from the Olympic team, a gold medalist, that tried to do much the same thing, to make the same escape as Grandmaster Allred, and was actually recaptured and brutalized, drugged, and put on Soviet TV to claim that he was kidnapped by the West. So it was a dangerous business. And there's another element to it also, and that is that besides the Cold War and the escape from the Soviet Union, there was also an element of taking out of the Soviet Union very important materials from the chess curriculum that the Soviets had used for years. They were known as, in those days, the most prepared in terms of basic methods of anybody in the world. And now, Lev didn't smuggle those out, but his friend I. M. Roman Peltz did.
Roman Peltz, who already was strong master. He was teaching me and some other kids, among them future grandmasters. And he was a very good teacher, very strong player. So he was my teacher, yes. Later, it kind of to jump a little bit ahead, Roman emigrated from Soviet Union in around 75. He went to Canada, started a chess school, became very great chess school. He was very popular there, and rightly so. And then when I defected from Soviet Union, like jumped the ship, ran away, when I was playing in West Germany, came to the United States, and straightforward went to play in U.S. Championship in Chicago. Roman happened to be there. We decided to share the room. So we shared the room, talked a lot. He told me about many things, including that when he was leaving Russia, he was able to smuggle, wasn't so easy, but he was able to smuggle his notes, which was basically the Soviet chess school plan, the foundation of this famous Soviet chess school, which created so many strong players, including numerous grandmasters and many world champions. So already at that time, in '79, both Roman and I began to play with the idea, maybe you should publish this book in English, and it's how the idea of and later mine, because I continued up to 17 volumes, the idea of this comprehensive chess course was born.
Lev is really active both as an author and as a publisher. His comprehensive chess series has brought chess to thousands of people. One of his more recent books he actually wrote with one of his students, John Crummiller, who's a great chess collector and chess historian, and together they wrote a book about the Magnus Carlsen and Sergei Karyakin match, along with Vladimir Kramnik, analysis by him, and that book won a lot of acclaim a few years ago.
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan of Lev. I made a comment here. I have 7 of Lev's books, right on my shelves. Okay, this is the one I got all excited about. He has his annotations, first of all, are really good. It's a great book, lots of diagrams and commentary and even evaluations of the positions graph, and it's a wonder he doesn't have heartbeat, pulse, and respiration in here. What's interesting about it is that you've got Lev talking to the average player, which he is very good at, and then you have Kramnik in there, a former world champ, talking about it. It's a great book, and I don't want to make it seem like Tal's book isn't great. It's like comparing art masterpieces. You don't want to say which one is better, but if I had to be stuck on the proverbial desert island, I'm going to take this book.
Lev Alburt and I are about the same age, about a year's difference. So we were in school. I was in the Midwest in school most of the time as a kid. And, he was growing up in the Ukraine under Soviet domination. And so we a number of times laughed about this experience. I was going through a duck and cover. You know what that is, when we had the drills about a possible nuclear attack from the Soviet Union, and we'd get under our wood tables, and so we would be safe. Well, at the same time, he was drawing maps because he was convinced that the Americans would invade in order to protect the suppressed people of the Eastern blocs. And he was drawing maps as a kid where the American paratroopers could find the armories of weaponry and so forth, and where the police stations were, where the army barricades were. So as a very early in life, he was certainly a dissident. He always craved freedom. He wanted to come to a free country. And he was against the old Soviet system.
Well, I wasn't child prodigy. I reached certain level. It was first category in Russia. It was probably like expert in America 2000. As a young player, 14 years old. In those years, was considered to be young for chess. And probably today it is young, because today we have grandmasters at 12, but those grandmasters wouldn't be in first 1,000 in the world. And the Russian experts in those days would be in first 200 and so on. And Russian A player probably was in first 1,000. And then I was stuck for several years. My peers with whom I played, like Tukmakov and others, became experts, and some even masters. Like Tukmakov became master at 16. I was still stuck at this A player level. I suddenly became an expert. Qualified for next stage in Soviet championship. I became Soviet quarterfinals. Then I make a master, very convincingly, and qualified into Soviet semifinals, where I already was playing grandmasters, great grandmasters, Lev Alburt, Mark Taimanov, many young masters, many of whom became my good friends for life. Steve Gulko, Razuvaev, Sonka. I even qualified into final group of 8. And from there, two top guys would qualify for Soviet championship, like 22 people or 24 people. And they won one of my greatest games in my life against Lev Alburt, who became the same year Soviet champion, who already was very strong master, 10 years older than me. It was a beautiful game, in very serve opening. He missed something in the very opening, like move 5. He could get big advantage with black. We both missed it. Later I found it, and we didn't find it during our analysis. I found it at home, and so changed a little bit, adjusted my repertoire. I still didn't qualify, but I came close. So suddenly from, within 1 year, I became from, like somewhere 990. I became like number 30 in the Soviet Union. Became strong master, really strong master. And it's interesting, maybe for viewers also, how I felt. Did they feel that I became stronger player? A little bit, but not much. But what really I felt what changed. It changed my attitude toward other players. So I began to see mistakes of other players. Look at other games, how other people were playing. And I was surprised to see how badly this attacker is attacking, how badly this endgame expert is playing. So when I played, for instance, an attacking player, I was better with black. And I had a chance. I know I can squeeze him easily, relatively easily, positionally, with no risk. Other move would give him good chances for attack. And if he attacks well, he will have some compensation. So I'm still better, but instead of really attacking rightly, he just, blundered on second or third move of the line and I crushed him easily. So the end game play I played again, I almost intentionally went to the end game, easily outplay him and was surprised how little he would see during analysis. So I'm just saying it not to bragging, but simply say that it's in the same thing I heard from other my friends, my peers, my students, that when you start becoming stronger, you don't feel too much that you're stronger, because when you become stronger, you also simultaneously feel or find how little you know. Because I know everything, but almost everything. But now, this is I have a fault, this I have a fault. And I begin to compare myself, not against my expert and master friends, I begin to compare against Polovievskis. And people like Polovievsky, like Tal, Taimanov, Bronstein. So again, I would begin to feel that people who were, for me, strong in this and this day became kind of weak. It was interesting observation, I think.
Ну, Лев Альбурт начал быть уже сильным шахматистом еще в середине.
Lev Alburt became a great chess master in the 1960s. In 1967, the Soviet Championship was held in eastern Ukraine, and Alburt participated. There were 126 players, and Alburt scored 6 points in 13 games, an amazing result. Still, his greatest chess success awaited him in the future. In 1969, he decided to become a professional chess player. Before this, he was an amateur, though he was a strong amateur. After 1969, he left his studies at the university to dedicate himself to professional chess. Lev Alburt enrolled in Odessa University's physics department with plans to become a physicist. Inspired by notable scientists like Lev Landau, Alburt studied there for 5 years, as is the norm. Being a great student, he entered the doctoral program to become a scientist. However, he had already had some success in chess and would soon devote himself to the game.
Yeah, I do know a pretty good story about when he was working on his PhD. As I recall, it was, his physics. I think it was thermonuclear energy, something pretty hard. And he was in the PhD program, and he had a mentor, a professor, as all PhD students do, who he worked with constantly on, his program. But chess players, grandmasters, could go to tournaments. They had a great deal more, I guess you'd say, freedom, and they had celebrity. And when they could travel, that means they could put a few pairs of blue jeans in their suitcase, literally, and come back and sell them and supplement the stipend that they were already given and the larger apartment they got for being grandmaster. Well, anyway, so he makes this difficult decision that he's going to drop out of the PhD program, not going to be a scientist or a professor, because of the attractiveness of his life. And also, I'm sure it's in the back of his mind, well, I get to travel, maybe I can leave the Soviet Union. Okay. Of course, he doesn't talk about that. But he goes to his mentor with great trepidation and tells him, and he's prepared to be scolded dropping out of a PhD program. And instead, after he says that, after he explains what he's going to do, his professor says something like, "Oh, I wish I could be a chess player."
Если говорить о периоде той жизни, когда...
When Albert became the Ukrainian champion from 1972 to 1974, did he have any close competitors? There were many strong players in Ukraine, of course, Until 1972, the most prominent player was Leonid Stein. He might even have been world champion, but he died young. After Leonid Stein died, some new prominent grandmasters appeared, and they became Albert's competitors, though Albert was not yet a grandmaster. Alexander Belyevsky, Romanishin, Kuzmin, Savon, and Tukmakov from Odessa. However, Albert was a standout among all the chess players in Ukraine.
Yes, I won the Ukrainian championship one after another. I don't think there was anything great, remarkable about any of them, at least looking back. They were all great players who were great, some became great. Belyevsky, Romanishin, Kuzmin, Savon, Platonov, Dorfman. I would say that was the strongest in each of them at the time. Maybe yes, maybe not. Probably was one of 5 or 6 equally strong. Probably was a little bit lucky in those tournaments. Maybe I was a little bit unlucky in some other tournaments which I didn't win. It happened I won 3 in a row and won them straight without any ties and so on and so forth.
I've been working at the World Chess Hall of Fame for over a decade now, and it's always an honor to research and promote the inductees into both the World and the U.S. Chess Halls of Fame. And I was honored enough to actually meet Lev Alburt in person in New York City when we were promoting the Bobby Fischer Against the World documentary. And so that was when I first started. So it was kind of like meeting a celebrity. That really hurt his reputation, obviously, in Russia, where they literally erased his name and games from Russian history. Kind of reminds you of like in Egypt when they would kind of, you know, destroy the pharaoh's pictures. They were wiping him away from history.
Lev Alburt spent his last evening in the Soviet Union at our house. I knew he wanted to leave the Soviet Union. We spoke about getting out being the right idea, but it was news to me when I learned he had defected. Boris Golko, in an interview in Chess Life, January 1987.
GM Boris Golko, who actually later was able to come to the United States. Boris Golko is the only person who ever won both the Soviet Championship, which was the most difficult in the world to win, and the U.S. Championship. Grandmaster Lev Alburt and Golko were friends from childhood. Grandmaster Alburt planned to go on this trip and defect. He had to keep it a secret. He couldn't tell anybody because they'd be put in terrible danger. Golko was already known as a refusenik, led to arrests and harassment by the Soviet officials and the police. Anyway, so they had a long walk around Moscow that evening, where they talked about things. They talked about their love of freedom, I suppose. They talked about things from their childhood, but Lev could never tell him the secret because that would put Boris in a terrible position.
And it was a surprise to Boris. I mean, you have to keep that sort of thing a surprise. When you emailed me, you asked me a question, about the defection. I mean, it's a big deal. I mean, it's an act of courage. It's an act of sacrifice because your family is involved in one way or another, usually staying behind.
But, the fact was Lev was leaving for the rest of his life. He knew it would be probably impossible ever to return, or if they'd see each other again.
Look, I am a chess player, I love chess. But really, the drive of my life was, I would not say politics. I would say freedom. I wanted to be free, relatively free. And still want to be relatively free. I don't want to impose my will on other people, but I don't want other people to dictate me how to live. So when I was probably already 5 or 6 years old, I hated the Soviet regime. And I was not really unique. Like Nathan Sharansky, who is 2 years younger than me, told me he rejoiced, and he wrote in his book, and when Stalin died, he was 5 years old and he rejoiced. Mostly because his dad his grandpa explained to him that Stalin is kind of very bad guy. He's going to kill us, Jews, and so on. My father didn't tell me. They didn't want to, do impose it on me. They never told me anything good about Soviet regime, but they try not to talk with me about those things.
And Lev calls it a prison camp. He says it's a prison camp because you can't leave without permission. You just, I can up and, and go anywhere I want. And you can't even go within the Soviet Union without permission. He remembers as a kid, this is in the interview, the Soviet Union decided to show the Grapes of Wrath with Henry Fonda, and the family piling all the junk on their car and, leaving the Dust Bowl to try and get to California and, get some sort of life together. And, it's really, it's really trying experience. Steinbeck did a great job with that book. And here's this movie, so they started showing it in the Soviet Union. And Lev says, the only two things we noticed in the movie were they had a car. It's like, how can they have a car? It's like everybody have a limousine today or something like that, And then they also noticed that they're going from state to state, but they don't need permission. They don't need ID. They're just going. Those people were astonished. So here's another thing gone wrong. They tried to show America, going through all these troubles, and yet people that are in this prison situation of a country just recognize little things we take for granted. And I think that helps you understand why Lev left. You have to feel for these people and why people chanced going over the Berlin Wall and getting shot as they were going over. It's just a terrible, terrible thing. So it's interesting to always hear from these people because we don't have that perspective. So the Lev Alburts and the Pal Benkos and the Boris Gulkos and the Victor Korchnoys are reality checks for Americans.
Especially, we had a bust, Stalin's bust in the statue in the whole of the room, school. And I remember that our teachers, and even our principal, who was father almost a god for, 7 years old, they were so scared of this statue. They were scared to turn back on it. They were scared that some kids running would touch the statue.
But if you read the stories, Benko's book has his story when he tries to defect in the underground in between East Berlin and West Berlin, and then the KGB, manages to stop it and so on. Benko ends up in jail. These are real people. Gulko gets beat up by the KGB, and he was the Soviet chess champion. Look at what happened to Korchnoi. Playing a world championship match with your son, in prison, and these people, take real risks. Lev came over. He didn't have much money. He showed up in the United States, and he just started playing in chess tournaments to win money and earn a living. There's no welfare, no nothing. It's like the quintessential American success story for immigrant comes to new land.
But then, you see, Odessa is on the Black Sea, and I like the sea. I often go to the sea. And then about 10 o'clock in the evening, they would close beaches. And they would have those projectiles looking to the sea to watching if any craft, any boat would go away. And what was interesting, was easy to see even for a child, that they were not looking for boats coming from inside. They were not afraid of invasions, of Turks coming in. They were afraid of defectors using a boat escaping to Turkey. So it's a country which people want to live, majority of people want to live.
I hardly ever discussed it with Lev. I didn't want to pester him on such things. He was asked so many times about it. I think the only time maybe we really discussed it in depth, we were traveling to Washington to meet with various political people, trying to smooth things over for Korchnoi to come to this country.
You got to remember, in the old Soviet Union, informants were every place. people tried to get in good with a harsh and autocratic government by telling on other people. So there was a code. Shamkovich. Well, Shamkovich was a GM who did get out of the Soviet Union. But if you went that route, if you Shamkoviched, you would first apply to go to Israel. Now, if you said Korchnoi, and there's a distinction to make here, but if the code was Korchnoi, that meant you planned a very dangerous escape, like Lev did. What's ironic about that second choice, Korchnoi, is that he really didn't plan to escape. He was already in the Netherlands, had said something intemperate that would put him in danger, and then decided not to go back. So that was a kind of a different one, but that's the only one to leave up until Lev. The third one was Spassky, and that was the hardest one, because if you Spassky'd, that meant that you would marry some beautiful and wealthy woman who lived in another country, like Spassky did, and when he married the French woman Marina, his beautiful wife. So that was the code.
But Lev has this fantastic story of being in West Germany playing for Russia in 1979 and going to the U.S. Embassy and saying, I need help, get me out of Russia.
So he said he was going for a walk. There were KGB there. There always were when the Soviet GMs went for a tournament. They were carefully watched over. And then there were other people, eager to report on everybody. That's the atmosphere there was. He took a couple of tins of beluga because that's what he could slip into his pockets, and he walked out of the hotel, and he of course, it was a very nerve-wracking experience. He caught a cab, and he first went to the Radio Free Europe offices. It was early in the morning, and he had listened to, secretly he'd listened to Radio Free Europe without getting caught, and he felt very friendly towards those voices of freedom they had heard. He listened to them for years, and so he thought, well, I'll go there, and they'll know what to do and keep me safe. Well, the taxi dropped him off, and but it was too early in the morning. Nobody was there, and then it occurred to him that surely that was under surveillance. That during the Cold War, that would certainly be a location that was under surveillance by Soviet agents. So now what to do? So, of course, he paid for the taxi with beluga. And so he got another taxi. He was lucky, and told them to take him to a police station. And when he went into the police station, he told them, he was defecting. And luckily, there was a very experienced captain of the police that knew what to do. It entailed a ride in a police car to the U.S. Embassy, where the policeman kept motioning to him, saying "Mach klein," Mach klein, which means make small in German. And what he wanted him to do was get his head down so he wouldn't be shot through the window. That's how dangerous it was. So this was a pretty spectacular escape. And it was the only one. It was the only escape by a GM from the Soviet Union.
The day of Stalin died was the happiest day of my life. The second happiest day of my life, or really not a day, but a period, almost a month, was in 89, when the Soviet system began collapsing in Eastern Europe. I guess probably in 20s, when we already felt that Push is collapsing. And on 20th of August 1991, and I was constantly in touch with various TV stations, radios, interviews, discussion with Vladimir Bukovsky, with Garry Kasparov, who was at the time in the United States, also predicting the Push would be over in several days, as I predicted. And I remember when we already saw Push is collapsing, probably late 20s, Garry called me and said, Lev, Lev, one day, many years from now, we both would remember this day as the greatest day of our life. I said, yes, Garry.
Well, I was going to say,
Okay.
I didn't realize that the Marshall Club was actually Marshall's home.
Yes, exactly. It was his home. He lives there, and in fact, members of his family continued to live there. I came to America in '79. I certainly was very soon at Marshall Chess Club. In fact, I went there on my next day after I arrived Friday evening. Saturday morning, I was already playing at Marshall Club.
I first met Lev after he defected. He came to, I believe, the Marshall Chess Club and the Manhattan Chess Club. I met him at both places. And he was very easy to get along with, and I liked him right away. And fairly soon we became friends.
He started off when he was in Russia, kind of like in the 70s, 80s in terms of top players in the US. I'm sorry, in the world. And then 3 years later, after playing in the US, he was in the top 25. So he really did benefit greatly playing chess in the United States.
In fact, I did very well. I won first 2 games. I probably won the tournament in my first $300, which in those days was a big sum of money for me. I came here with $70 in my pocket. Of course, I had a friend who could help me, but still, it's my own money. But then, when your player, Joe Lux, with whom I often communicate on the internet, he told me, Lev, why would you go to play the US Open? It starts tomorrow. Let's go. We'll buy tickets. I will help you. So I went to Subway at night. It's, second day in New York. I met at a certain station. I met Joe Lux. We went to the airport. We got tickets. We flew to Chicago. It's how I started my chess career in the United States. So Marshall Chess Club was really the first place I visited after coming to the United States. It was next day, Friday. I'm here. Saturday morning, I'm at Marshall Chess Club.
Yes, I want to mention whether you use it or not. There's something that Lev doesn't even know. In 1979, I drove up from Lincoln, Nebraska, where I was teaching high school, with a friend, and we got there just as this finals of the Blitz tournament was being played. We all crowded around to see who it was, and there was a guy I'd never seen before, and it was Lev Alburt. He was playing Blitz. I didn't know him well enough to say hello at that time, but it was kind of ironic. That's about the only thing I saw at the U.S. Open that year, and it was the fellow that would later help to write all these books.
And when Lev did that in '79, that was a big deal. It was a really big deal, and it kind of opened the floodgates back then, to encourage others to do it. So he was a pioneer in that respect. And he jumped right in. No, by 1980, he was first board on our Olympiad team.
So Lev Alburt played first board in the 1980 Chess Olympiad, just a year after he defected to the United States. Some people defect for more opportunities, but for him it was for political reasons. And he said that he always idolized the United States growing up, and even at one point he'd heard a rumor that the US was going to liberate the area where he lived and rushed to meet them, but that didn't happen. And so for him, representing the United States in 1980 must have been quite a feat, a really special moment.
As you all know, if you want to be one of the top men or women in the U.S., being born in this country is not likely. Very unlikely. Okay. However, in the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, you were born in this country. That's what happened. And then between 1975 and 2000, a lot of people from other countries came to the U.S. and they're the best chess players. Okay. And Albert was one of the guys who came from, Soviet Russia, and then he beat everybody. And it sort of started Pal Benco was the only foreign player here, and he was a candidate. He was one of the best players in the world. And then we got Shamkovich and Jinjashvili and Albert, and now, a lot of the top players are from other countries. And, we have some born here. And because of that, the U.S. got a lot stronger at chess because we had 2 or 3 times as many grandmasters as we used to. So the U.S. championship became stronger. Our Olympic team became more competitive, and open tournaments were really strong. Now you kids are kids. So you're like, man, when I played that guy, he was too good. So I didn't want to play him anymore. So I played that kid that I beat 80 games in a row. Okay. Now, when you're an adult, you would like to play grandmasters so you can become a grandmaster. If everybody you play as an adult is rated 1100, you won't become a grandmaster. So it's actually really good that a lot of people from other countries who were good at chess moved here, so everybody got good. Now everybody's good. Now we got a lot of good players, man. Everybody's strong.
I could stay in Germany, play for German club. It was very good. You know, I knew people in this club. They liked me. I liked them. I liked the owner, Egan Everts. It was in Zollingen. But I wanted to go to America, mostly because I felt the reason I decided to defect and leave everything I loved behind, and I love anything in Russia. My friends, my family, I love Russia. And but I felt that communism is on the march. Communism is taking over the world, which was true if you look at the map in '79. So I cannot help it fighting from inside. I tried, as Solzhenitsyn said, not to live the lie. I never was saying Soviet Komsomol. I tried to avoid, any actions which would be, which I could avoid, like signing letters against Fisher or signing letters against Israel. But still, I could not do anything really good, except by becoming open dissident, like Bukovsky, Sharansky, Spassky. So I decided to defect, fight from this side, and I felt that I can do it more efficiently from America. So my German friends, policemen, good friends, became friends, brought me to American embassy. They interviewed me for one day, then gave me permission to go to the United States. I waited for a couple of weeks in Italy while they were examining my health and so on. And I was brought to the United States. My friend from Odessa, Michael Feinberg, who was my coach, but really not in the sense of coach. He was like Silvia Danilov was to Vasilin Topalov. He was more manager and friend than technical coach. But he certainly helped me during tournaments and helped me with advice before tournaments, after tournaments. So he had a large apartment, 3-room apartment in Brooklyn. I joined him, and I stayed with him for 1 year. In those days, I traveled a lot. I probably spent home maybe 2 or 3 months. I was traveling mostly in Europe. I was working with Viktor Korchnoi, helping him in the next cycle of Canadian matches. I went to Wacken there when I met Americans, Robert Doran, Yasser Servan. I played there. And I was invited to play for Dutch club, which I continued to do for almost 8 years. Then I moved to Manhattan, where I live since, mostly because, again, it was easier to play chess because most tournaments were in Manhattan, and also was easier for politics because all political centers, like National Review magazine with Bill Buckley and others, were in Manhattan. So I went to Manhattan, rented an apartment on Upper East Side, which at that time costed me $430. In Brooklyn, we paid together for our apartment $250. And so I lived in this apartment since for already almost 41 years.
Oh, so it's the same apartment you're in now?
Yeah, I'm a very conservative person. I don't like change for the sake of change. So it would be some really change for obvious bet, I would do it, but I don't seek the change. All other things equal, I would rather, wear the same shirt, eat the same food. I would deviate a little bit. Today I can eat spaghetti. Tomorrow I would eat, some, burrata, whatever. But basically I stick with the same things.
There's a book called The Russians versus Fischer, which if anybody wants to know anything about how the Russians looked at Fischer and how they conspired and organized and everything they could. I mean, it was an entire country of professional chess players, trying to defeat this rather individualistic American. It was very serious business, and they were a little over the top, like when Lev was in that one tournament. He defects, and then they took his name out of the tournament. They just put little blanks. They made it a buy type thing.
Well, this was a normal standard practice in Russia, in Soviet Union rather. If you defected, you immediately get scratched out from books and tournament reports. Fortunate, for example, would be winning tournaments in the West, and it would say, second place. It would start with second place finisher, and people would know that it's Korchnoi who won the tournament. It was like, second place, Yusupov, third place, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, where's the first place? Where's the first? I wonder who's first in that case. It's interesting. There's a big article. No one came in first. Very strange term. So, yeah, Lev was obviously recipient of that as well.
And the Soviet encyclopedia, if you had a copy of the set of the Soviet encyclopedia in those days, they would send you clippings to paste over sections of the encyclopedia because they changed the history. So that's, and it gives you a real feel for just how dangerous that society was.
I was coming up, and obviously, first game, I remember it was very funny. First game we ever played at the Marshall Chess Club, I believe, some international, and at some point I thought I had a good position, so I offered him a draw. And he declined, and he said, I'll think about it, and then, very nice, kind, and then he just said no, and then he beat me like 6 months later. I resigned, and he asked me, he said, Maxim, why did you offer me a draw? Did you think you had a good position? I mean, in retrospect, when I look at that position where I offered a draw, it's almost resignable, but I actually thought I was okay. I just thought I was playing some really funky chess, and it was very maybe okay, but I missed some key issues. I was like a 2200 player. He was, like ridiculously better than me. And so I said, yeah. I said, oh, okay, well, now I understand, because he was trying to understand why would I offer a draw in what he thought was a losing position. But he was nice.
Lev Alburt won 2 U.S. Opens. The first in 1987 was held in Portland, and that was after he became a member of the USTF policy board. So he had to split his time both as, kind of doing these political actions, but then also being a player in the U.S. Open. He was really worried about how he'd be able to achieve both goals during one tournament, and he had been studying a lot, and he decided that he was going to focus just on playing the game and enjoying the games. He said, I wanted to focus on a radical idea that chess is fun. So he was able to do both, and he also at the same time held a press conference promoting the Strategic Defense Initiative, even at that same tournament. And he won the 1987 U.S. Open. His next U.S. Open victory came in 1989, and that was in Chicago. In these tournaments, sometimes he thought that some players kind of separated their U.S. Open championship wins from their U.S. championship wins, but to him, they were both equally important, and he thought that the U.S. Open and other Swiss-style tournaments should get more respect, and that they should also always get a clear winner.
Now, Lev Alburt did 2 things other grandmasters don't do. Okay, he always played the Alekhine with black, and now there are grandmasters who will play the Alekhine, but he always played it. Other ones play it once a year. He played it every tournament, every game. You don't know what that is, but you'll learn what it is. And he also played the Benco Gambit a lot. And actually, I remember many years ago, there was it was in a magazine, and somebody said, what's the longest you ever thought on a move? And I remember Joel Benjamin saying he was playing Lev Alburt, and Albert played the Benco, and Joel played his usual whatever he plays. And Albert had a novelty ready, and something like Joel took 1 hour and 50 minutes for the first 12 moves. So it wasn't on one move, but it was a series of, yeah.
In chess, opening-wise, I'm sort of perfectionist. I want to know my opening very well. Some people can play almost anything. Today, it's even easier with help of computer, like Carson play almost anything, including Alekhine defense, which I discussed with him, but it was in New York a couple of years ago. And he played very well. But so I would prefer, I always play the same opening, which was, in my opinion, best, not best in general, best for me. For instance, with black, I used to play, after years, I developed certain system in Sicilian, 4-9 Sicilian, which I played against strong players, strong masters, some grandmasters with good success, some great games, good games. But I knew there was one flaw. There was one line where white, if he does certain moves, he gets small advantage, small endgame advantage. No one did against me. So I keep playing. Then I was playing in Soviet semi-final against young Anatoly Karpov, who just became a grandmaster. He was 19. He played system against me, and Karpov really wasn't a theoretician. He was more relying on playing the middle game. But here, either he found himself, or he found with his coaches, Furman or Zubayev, he plays his line. He got a small advantage in game advantage. And of course, he was a great player already. We adjourned, I was worse. We played against another Jordan session, 6 hours, but Jordan again, I lost the game. Karpov came first, I came third, so I didn't qualify. 2 people would qualify in Soviet Championship. So I was so disgusted, and I said, okay, now everyone would play against me this line. I must stop it. I told you about Karpov. As a friend older friend was Yefim Kogan, chess master. So Kogan showed me some lines in Alekhine with his usual gusto. Of course, I wasn't that impressed, but I saw that in some main line of Alekhine, really main line, I liked black's position. And then I began to like them more. I saw I could contribute to them, I could even improve. And I liked it. I began to play Alekhine, became quite successful. You can contribute a lot, find new lines, even almost change the course of Fischer-Spassky match by showing Spassky how to beat Alekhine defense, how to get a big advantage with white. But Spassky didn't want, we were good friends. Spassky didn't want to listen to me. I'll sit down over there, Schiffer, he called him not Fischer, but Schiffer. Schiffer would never play it against me. Not because he was so proud of, like Fischer wouldn't dare to play it against me. Fischer knows me, he wouldn't dare. In reality, Fischer played twice Alekhine defense, drew one game and won another. So in the first game, Spassky could get big advantage. In the second game, if we use my novels, he also gets very substantial advantage. Interestingly, Anatoly Karpov found the same thing which I found, the flaw in black's play. And he told me, Lev, we were friends. He told me, Lev, do you know this line? Yes, I know. Okay, Lev, don't worry. No one will play it for years. I would play it soon. No one played against Alekhine against me. This line which you plays the best line for black, really most challenging. And then Spassky and Karpov were preparing. In Russia was popular summer camps, preparation camps prior to the match. And he and Karpov they play cards, they have billiard and so on, pool. Spassky didn't like to prepare, at least for this match. He had a cheery or fresh head. It's more important to have a fresh head. Perhaps he was right, but probably not exactly. So Karpov told him, Boris, let me show how Fischer can play Alekhine. He used to play it in the United States. Let me show you. It's relatively easy. I'll show how to get advantage. Popular line, but I even show you advantages in the line no one knows, which say Lev invented. But Fischer may found it also, and you can beat him there. And Boris looked at him and said, oh no. And he said, look, it will take only half an hour, maximum an hour. Give me at least a few minutes, 10 minutes. Oh, come on, let's play bridge. Whatever. Schiffer would have played against me. So it was my experience with this opening.
The reason Albert was a top player is when he did play wild and crazy, usually he won because he was a great understanding of tactics and piece activity and putting pressure on his opponent, making his opponent have a tough time.
You have Susan Polgar around, great lady, great chess player, and you also of course have Rex, who is a great guy, and I know him, met him in New York, never taught him, never benefited from his club, but they bought one of my paintings, so I did benefit from their club, like $8,000. But I never played there, never was there, but certainly today Rex's club, St. Louis club, is like Mecca of chess. It's the greatest place for chess. So I may later, if you like, mention some great American sponsors, otherwise it will be too long list. Certainly Ted Field was one of them. Rex today is like Ted Field used to be around 1990. I definitely can go without sleep I certainly can go without sleep one night and be very productive as long as I can drink say 8-10 cups of coffee.
Okay.
So no, I'm not tired. You can test me.
Okay.
Just to give you a story, one of my students, famous student, Ted Field, who was sponsor of New York match Kasparov-Karpov in 1990, he was, as a young man, it was his hobby because he was very rich man, he was billionaire, but he had a hobby. He was driving, he was, like those like Tour of France, he was driving cars and he had to be alert for more than 48 hours, sometimes 60 hours. So I remember once I was playing in his house. He was a strong player. He became a strong player. He was at the time maybe like 1900, 1800. Later he became around 2000. So it was 7 o'clock. They had dinner. They had guests. So I became nervous. He was coming, and I said, okay. I said, look, I will go greet the guests, and then I will go back to play with Lev. So some of the guests came, say hello to me, went back, and so on. The wife became, Susan is her name, I think. She became almost proud of him. She was telling, look, my dad is playing for 12 hours already against United States chess champion. And he's still playing. So he played. Then she went to sleep. It was probably already 1 a.m. And I guess I'm not a bad psychologist, especially around chess. And I got the idea that he had a hope that he would that I would get tired, that he would beat me. I said, Ted, look, you're paying me very well. I'm happy to play with you the entire night. And I told him what I told you, that I'm used to analyze the journal at night. So as long as you supply me with coffee, we can play till morning and even after the morning. At some time, maybe tomorrow, you would outsit me because you car drivers, long distance, and I'm only a chess player. So you can go without sleep for 3 days and nights, and I only for 2. But I said, look, but you still wouldn't beat me. As long as my hand make a move, my hand is better than you. You're a good player, but my hand is not a grandmaster hand, but my hand is, say, expert hand. And it's almost master. My hand would beat you. So you can make me fall asleep, which happens at some moment, but you wouldn't beat me. So he smiled, and around 2 p.m. we called the cabinet, brought the home.
After Bobby Fischer's victory in the 1972 World Chess Championship, a lot of chess players found new opportunities in teaching, and many times that was in scholastic chess. But what Lev Alburt made a name for himself in was in teaching kind of captains of industry, stock market traders. He said it helped people like that because they often have to make split-second decisions, and chess was something that could help you think more creatively and decisively. Some people that he taught would like to kind of take up a hobby to distract them from the pressures of day-to-day life, and then others kind of, just wanted to get a better rating or play more beautifully and things like that. Remember Ted Fields, the heir to the Marshall Field Company, is one of his students, and he helped bring the World Championship here to the United States the first time in many years. And that was also through kind of Lev's influence as well. He's a promoter, a great promoter of the game, and so U.S. Chess is really lucky to have him as kind of a player, a promoter, and an author.
Back in the 70s and 80s, they played a little more aggressively. Now, this was a perfect kind of style for an American, and here's the reason. Between 50, gotta say something, and 2000, that sounds good. If you played in Europe, you were probably playing in a round robin, which means everybody plays everybody, there's 10 players, and they're all really good. And then, try to win a couple games and try not to lose any games. That's what happens now at the top level. However, in the United States, we didn't have a lot of that. We had a lot of go play in that 300-player tournament. Now, if you play in the World Open, the New York Open, the US Open, Foxwoods, the National Open, the Chicago Open, and I can go on, you get 2 wins and 7 draws, you didn't win any prize money. You're winning and losing a lot because you're playing more aggressively. You gotta win in American Swisses. You can't go to an American Swiss that's 9 rounds and get 9 draws. Lev Alburt, who you can see is playing a little crazier than usual, when he moved to America, fit right in. He's like, yeah, wild and crazy, no draws. So he's winning the U.S. Open, he's winning the World Open, the New York Open, the U.S. Championship.
2 games a day. This was really a big surprise. In Russia, we played only 1 game a day, and then often there were special days for adjournance, and there were free days, a certain leisurely schedule. But, I realized that here everyone plays this way. So I certainly can play. If other people can do, I can certainly do it, and I did. It was an easy adjustment. I didn't have any problem with it. To play, say, in Kochberg's tournament, like World Open, whatever. I didn't take even buys, never took buys, as far as I can remember. So I played like 5 days in a row, 2 games a day, not a big problem. Once, when I played a tournament in Massachusetts, they have a tournament with almost the same time control as in Goldberg's tournament. They had a tournament with 1 day was 3 games a day. I played. I realized it's a little bit too much. But 2 games a day was okay. Basically, so this was not a problem. There was, did I adjust my style? Well, of course, when you play in Swiss tournament, in my situation, really the best place, not the only place, but almost only place is first place.
Well, I think he's a very creative player. He's an attacking player, but he's also a balanced player. He can defend very well, and he's not afraid to mix it up. His style is hard to copy, but I think it's very effective, and it's fun to play over his games. They're filled with all kinds of interesting nuances and subtleties and surprises. So he's a great player to study. He's so deep, but I can appreciate him. And a lot of his things are quite complex, but he has a great sense for what might work. He's usually on the money. So I like Lev's style.
Probably my style became more aggressive, a little bit, and more risk-taking. I paid, say, $1,000 for travel, for hotel, and so on. So I have a chance making a draw, and then go to the restaurant, relax, and so on, help my students, and they would get $5,000. So I would earn $4,000 for 5 days' work. Not bad, rating-wise, but mostly money-wise. If I win, I would get $10,000. And firstly, if I would play white, I would almost never agree for a draw, even with equal opponent. And if I play, say, black, and he offers me a draw, or offers me a draw by his moves, playing quietly with white, not ambitiously, here I would think, okay, if I would win the game, I'm clear first. And in Goldberg's tournament, it was often like $25,000 in good years, $20,000. And if I drew, several people would catch us. There would be like 4-way tie. I would get 10,000. If I lose, I would get 2,000. So, of course, it would be unpleasant if I lose, get only 2,000, not 10. But he is 25. And say chances are 50-50. For instance, I feel that with black, I'm equal to him. Well, I would say the mind says you must play. The heart say, no, don't do it. But I think my mind should be stronger than, my emotions. It's like in stock market, people panicking, selling, everybody selling, let me also say. The mind says, it's good stock, don't sell it. But what might happen something. So you should be strong. And I taught myself to be strong, and I almost always, in such situation, would go for max. If I would feel that, I'm a little bit worse, my chances to win are smaller, I have to make very big risks, and very likely I would lose, then I wasn't reckless. It wasn't just to win. But really I was aided by my head. I taught myself, forced myself to be. It was also what I learned from Botvinnik. He was also very calculating in this, good sense.
Hort plays all positions well, but mainly Hort is a technician. Hort wants to get a better position and then grind you down. So he's playing very boring. It's like, I'm going to play bishop b2, I'm going to play e4, and I'm up a pawn, and I'll win in 1,000 moves. And Lev Alburt's like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to sack everything and confuse you. Tax the queen again, queen f1, setting up for the next game. Man, black's pretty active, right? Knight g1. The truth hurts. Man. You know, that's just really active pieces for black. You dream a position like that. Okay? Then he played king h3, running away. All right. And then he resigned, I would say, a bit too late. That's what I would say.
Michael Botvinnik was, of course, a great chess player. He was also much older than me. I was born in 45, he was born in 11, so it was big difference, like 34 years between us. But so I met him in chess club occasionally in 60s, early 70s. And of course, I would say politely hello. He would nod his head without knowing probably me, obviously. I was a master, one of many. But then he came to Odessa in 72 to give some exhibitions and rather lectures. And we became really friends. I don't know how it happened, but we became friends. We liked each other. We found many things in common. I was, by my profession, before I became a chess player, I was studying theoretical physics, which basically mathematics, statistics, probabilities. Graduated from postgraduate school in Odessa before moving to chess. But Finik also had the similar education. Also was very interested in various statistic probabilities. I wasn't really his pupil. I knew many of his pupils and knew about his school. We discussed his school. We both liked teaching, so we discussed techniques of teaching. But we basically were friends, talk about everything, including politics. To surprise of many, Botvinnik was like I, was a strong anti-communist, hated the Soviet regime. And we talk about obviously about chess, and he gave me a lot of valuable advice. So I owe some of my successes, obviously, to him. In fact, a lot of my successes. I can talk about Botvinnik for hours.
I had first met him at a conference in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon. I'll never forget, I interviewed Botvinnik for about 15 or 20 minutes with a translator. And talking about this and that. And suddenly I posed a question about Fischer and his famous draw with Bobby Fischer. And just like that, Botvinnik didn't wait for the translator to say what I had said. He immediately answered me, saying, no, I had a draw. I wasn't lost. Speaking in perfect English. And I realized at that point he was merely using the translator as a kind of buffer, so he wouldn't make any mistakes. Anyhow, I got to know him at that point.
And in fact, I wrote recently to Chess Life, answering reader's question. So the editor asked me to write a short answer, short, half-page answer. It was basically how Botvinnik would fare against, say, Magnus Carlsen. And I explained what happened if Botvinnik would be preparing for Magnus Carlsen. And I kind of indicated that I expected Botvinnik to win. Botvinnik as anti-communist, people couldn't believe. And I'm telling them, look, guys, go to see a picture. You probably saw this picture in my book, in this City Davis Bobby Fischer. There is my picture, and it was in Chess Life, I guess February 1984. There was a picture of me, Botvinnik, and several other people, like 3 or 4 or 5 people, with glasses of champagne. We were in this. We were together at Manhattan Chess Club.
I think I had to write a story on for Chess Life very quickly on the meeting of Botvinnik, Reshevsky, and Rubin Fine, and Mrs. Capablanca. We brought them all together at the Manhattan Chess Club. It was a big celebration. And I had to get that in very quickly, and I was meeting with Lev. And so I rather rudely used that time to complete the piece. Although I tried to entertain Lev with jokes and etc. mitigate the situation somewhat. Yeah, but that's what it was. I had to get that in, and Lev was in on that party at the Manhattan Chess Club. It was very hard to bring those three Avro greats together. First of all, Fine and Reshevsky did not like each other, and they never spoke. And of course, Botvinnik, then in Soviet Russia, not easy to get him here. And but it was only by the fact that Mrs. Capablanca, they all wanted to see Mrs. Olga Capablanca. And she was really the agent that inspired them to come together at the Manhattan Chess Club. Again, that's the story I was writing about, rudely in front of Lev. And of course, he was also at that later at that engagement.
And at that moment, I was a defector. I didn't immigrated legally. I ran away. I didn't return, which is a crime. My sentence would be probably was at least 10 years in jail. So Botvinnik was Soviet citizen. And obviously, when he was traveling to New York, he was certainly told, as everyone else was told, don't meet with immigrants, but especially don't meet with those who defected because they're enemies. So we spent good time together with other people, with Bruce Pandolfini, who was interviewing Botvinnik for Chess Life. Then we went to Rubin Fine office together with Sammy Reshevsky, where they make this photograph. And then we went to Manhattan Chess Club, where they were. Bruce Pandolfini was going, or the photographer for Bruce was going to make a photograph for Chess Life, to be put inside Chess Life. And there was Artur Bezgayer, the manager of the club, there was Bruce, and Reshevsky, Champagne. So I took my glass and I moved aside. And when he left there, come in. I said, Michael, this photograph would be in Chess Life. In Moscow, they subscribe for Chess Life. And Karpov's team would get this Chess Life. And they would use it against you. It's because, why? Because Botvinnik, who earlier was Karpov's coach, later became Kasparov's coach. And in '83, he was already working with Kasparov, preparing him against Karpov. So they would use anything they could against Botvinnik. They look. And Botvinnik looked at me and said, Lev, what could they do to me? I guess it was 83, so he was 70 years old, a little bit younger than I am now. Look, Lev, what they can do to me? At worst, they would close me, they wouldn't let me travel again abroad. I'm not really so eager to travel. Come in. And champagne and so on. So I'm just saying, if Botvinnik would be not a real friend, or if he wouldn't be a real communist, who would, in this case, had some hesitation about my act, and I was not simply a defector, I was very anti-spoken, anti-Soviet person. I was speaking on various short waves on the Soviet Union with so-called anti-communist propaganda and so on. I worked with Solzhenitsyn, I worked with some other people, like one of those I sent you was Vladimir Bukovsky, a leader of anti-communist movement. I worked with American anti-communists like Jack Kemp, Jesse Helms, Reagan, and people in Reagan's team. So I was really the enemy, a real enemy. And Botvinnik really didn't care, because if he didn't want it, he would simply, you couldn't imagine that I kind of forced myself into picture. Because even if I did, it would be enough for Botvinnik to call Chess Life and say, guys, please help me, I don't want to, I like Alburt, he's a nice guy, but please, And they would certainly accommodate him. But when he was leaving, I gave him a couple of books. He wanted to take them with him, and he wanted to pay me for them. And he told me, Lev, I know that you're not making so much money, and I got my honorarium, so let me at least pay for books. I said, Michael, I wouldn't mind if you wanted me to pay for books. Officially, they cost $40. But I said, I didn't, I needed to pay for them. I got them from a special center in New York, who was managed by Lady Veronica Stein, a niece of Solzhenitsyn, incidentally. And this center was giving books for free to those who would pass them to Russia. So they're giving me a lot of free books, which then I was trying to pass to Russia, either through Russians or maybe through Czechs, through Yugoslavs, and so on and so forth. So I thought, well, Michael, but I can't charge for books which I didn't pay for them. He smiled, sorry. And after that, unfortunately, we didn't see each other. But we have been in touch on phone. It was before internet. We often talk on phone. Sometimes exchanged letters. and I love him, and he's a great guy, and I hope he's with God.
It's a great achievement to win the U.S. Championship under any conditions. But certainly, you never know who's going to win the title. And Lev has won it 3 times. Not too many players have done that. He deserved to win that title that year. And I think it was the next year he won as well. And a few years later, he won again. And all 3 times, I think he deserved to be the champ. He's a great player. And he's a good guy. Lev's a very good guy, easy to get along with. And I think at that point, there were some grandmasters who were resentful because he knew so many people and people liked him so much. And so many of them are removed and distant and don't get along as well as Lev does. He's a very convivial, easygoing, social-minded individual and fun to be around.
Lev Alburt won 3 U.S. championships, the first in 1984 in Berkeley, California. And a writer for Chess Life noted that it could have been called a tournament of champions because you had so many people who were past champions, or that writer didn't know, but they would be future champions. So there are people like Joel Benjamin, Larry Christensen, Robert Byrne, a lot of great names in American chess, and Albert came on top. And that was the first time in many years that a former champion hadn't come in first or second.
I really didn't look at people like specifically like rivals. When I play in tournaments, I like to win the tournament, I like to come ahead of someone. I didn't really feel, this guy is my rival, I have beat him, or I enjoy that someone is my rival. He played in some tournament where I didn't play, a tournament in Europe, but he came last, I enjoy, I'm ahead. No, I didn't feel this way. I concentrated on my own results mostly. As far as real competition, when I came here, I think probably the strongest player was Lyubosh Kovalek. He was for several years among top 10 in the world. He died recently. He was living in Washington, writing column, very good column in Washington Post. Really great player. And so Lyubosh was, I think, the strongest. But I came and sort of supplanted him. He didn't like it, but we remained first simply on good terms, and then we became real friends again. Walter was like second after Lyubosh for a while. There was, of course, Robert Byrne was also a great player, playing his matches. There were some still very strong players from older generation, Benco, Larry Evans, Lombardi. And Yasser was kind of up and coming. In fact, Yasser and I don't think I met him in the United States, but I met him, I came here in August, or late July 1979. Then I went soon to work with Korchnay, and then together with Korchnay I went to play in Weisskind in Holland. And Yasser played there and Robert Byrne. There we met, became friends, both with Robert and with Yasser. Yasser was, I guess, 19 years old, and I think he won a tournament, or maybe he came second, but he did very well, exceptionally well in this tournament. We became friends, and I think we kind of kept, I wouldn't say we remain friends. Now we simply kind of, he's somewhere, I guess, lives mostly in Netherlands. He's married to a Dutch girl, often is in St. Louis. I would say that mostly, it's part joking, but I think Yasser and I, we divided the world, so to speak, between us. Yasser took Europe and kind of FIDE chess, and I took American chess. I didn't like to travel, so I like to play at home mostly. Albeit I had to travel to Europe. If you want to be a professional player, you had to go to Europe. So Yasser, so I think if you look at those years when I played here from 79 to say 91, 92, and Yasser played here, I guess my American results were somewhat bigger, somewhat higher than Yasser's. I was more often US champion. I was 2 US Opens. I was winning Rapids. I was winning Blitzes and so on. But Yasser also did well in the United States, but he also did very well in Europe, better than I. Yasser qualified twice into Canada's matches. I never qualified. I played in two interzonals already in the West, but he didn't qualify. Yasser qualified twice, and I think he even won his first match at least once in one of those candidates matches, maybe even in both. So maybe came among top 8 in the world. So I never was so high in those matches.
And he has many wonderful games that are on the databases. You can look them up. Very, very imaginative, very dynamic, I think, is certainly an adjective that applies to his play. But also very practical. You know, he's not going to play a mainline 30 moves deep, as you see a lot of grandmasters do. Of course, this is all before computers, you know. So, and he was playing Yakin's defense, you know, E4, knight F6, when it was, and winning the U.S. championship playing that, when it was an opening that was, I would say, disrespected.
Now, Lev Alburt is the father of the Alekhine in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. He was the guy playing it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Lev was a great player, but in '84, my first U.S. championship, where I played as the U.S. junior champion, he won that tournament. He won that champion, and he basically, I mean, he scored some ridiculous number of points. I did well because I started very well. I started 4.5 out of 5, and I remember Dmitry Gurovich was telling me, "You'll play in many, many U.S. championships. You will never again have 4.5 out of 5." And he was right. I had 3.5 out of 5. The following one, but not 4.5. And then, so actually, after I was leading, obviously, with that score for a while, but then in round, I believe 10 or something, Lev and I played, and he beat me in a very nice game, and he took the lead. And from then on, he never relinquished it, and he just kept beating everybody else.
His second championship was in 1985 in Colorado. It was actually held at the Stanley Hotel, which inspired the movie The Shining by Stephen King. And the owner, Frank Normali, was a huge chess fan, and writing for Chess Life, Patrick Wolf noted that he was also a really great host. And it sounded like the players had a lot of fun at that tournament. On the rest day, they got together to take Old West photographs. So you had like Walter Brown holding up someone with a gun, and Lev Alburt apparently appeared in some of the photos as a cowboy. And he came out on top of that tournament as well.
The U.S. Championship was a round-robin event. Everybody played everybody. And so you could prepare ahead of time. You knew who you were going to play and when, and what color and all that. And so that's one set of things. But opens, you never know who you're going to play. Somebody might be hot you know nothing about. And also in the open games, you have to essentially win most of your games. You can draw some, but you have to keep winning. You don't have to keep winning in a round robin. You know, you get a few points ahead, you can draw some games and finish at the top or near the top by just keeping a solid plus score. You usually got to do much better than that in an open. You can't drop too many points. Maybe you can drop a half point or 1 point. Depends how long the open is. So yeah, you have to win those games. Now you'll be playing many weaker players in the open initially. It'll get fairly tough by the end because the guys who are winning obviously are good players or are very hot and they're performing well. So yeah, they're radically different types of events, but they may have been equally, or they can be equally hard to win.
Walter Brown was kind of at the end of his 6th championship run, you know, so it was after Brown's peak, but Larry Evans, Larry Christensen, Yasser Seirawan, and then later in the 80s, Roman Jashvili came over, Joe Benjamin, Nick DeFermian, Michael Wilder. They were his competitors during those days, his championship days.
They're all very talented players. And, you know, when you think about it, the days of one person dominating American chess are over for the time being. unless some other Fischer-like person arises. But, it's like the World Series today. Different, Bill. You got a 2011 Series championship poster right there behind you for the Cardinals. But I grew up, I was born in 1947. So the first 18 years of my life until I graduated high school, the New York Yankees won 15 pennants. For me as a kid in the New York metropolitan area, the only question was, who are the Yankees going to play in the World Series this year? Back then there were three. Well, look at today. I mean, we have, practically a different champion every year. It could be So. It could be Nakamura. It could be any of these new guys. It could be, it could be some person we haven't heard of yet. They rise so fast now. So, so he just was part of an era, it was the post-Fischer era. Once Fischer left, that was it. The, best in America was up for grabs.
Lev Alburt, he doesn't play 15 moves of theory and then get the E5 square and then win an isolated pawn and then beat you 90 moves in the end game. That's what I do. Okay, Lev Alburt plays crazy chess. His opponent says, "What's happening?" and then he checkmates you. Okay, and Lev Alburt, 3-time U.S. champion, won the U.S. championship 3 times because he was good at playing that style.
But as far as the people he competed against, he then won the U.S. championships in 84, 85, back-to-back. And then again, after he really hadn't been so serious about chess for a while, came back to it in 1990 and won again.
And he wasn't super young when he was playing in those later tournaments, which is another thing that's amazing to watch, because it does kind of seem like some players peak by the time they're 40. And so when you see them doing these amazing things, especially in a U.S. championship, that's really impressive.
And then his third win was in 1990, and that was at a U.S. championship that was held concurrently with the U.S. Open, and it was held in kind of a unique format where the players had to play 240 move matches where all the moves had to be made in 2 hours. And it was somewhat controversial because if you lost your match, you were out of the championship. You would have to go you could then go join up in the US Open. And Lev had really fierce competition in that first round. He was playing against Yasser Seirawan, who was a multi-time US champion, and he came out on top. And then he would play a number of other rounds against other strong American players, ultimately having to compete against Larry Christensen as his final match. And he came out on top in that tournament.
Lev was dominating in different ways. For example, when he won the U.S. championship in Jacksonville, it was in a different format. It was a knockout format, and if you think about what he did, it was unbelievable. He was unstoppable. He was like a machine.
When he won back-to-back, that was a big deal. He won 2 years in a row, and then after that, he was writing he was writing his books. He was giving lessons because he always earned his own way in the new capitalist system. He was a capitalist at heart and a free enterprise person at heart. It's what brought him here. And I guess the surprise maybe was 1990, and I think it surprised him too. He was working on his books. He did his own publishing. He taught himself, learned about how to publish books and how to market books. He didn't write for another publisher. He became his own publisher very successfully. He wasn't nurturing his game in the same way that a lot of the competitors would have been. He was working on other things, but he won it, and it was a tough field.
And the event you mentioned in your letter to me, as in 1990, indeed we played in American Champion, U.S. Championship, Invitational Championship, 16 top players by rating, but in this case, they use different formula. Rather than round robin, they make it knockouts, eliminating matches. And in my first round, I play Yasser, And we played 2 games. And if it's a draw, we would play a tie break with rapids and blitzes and so on. So it was tough, big fight. First game I won very well with black. Good game, really high-class game. Next game I was playing white, and Jacek gave me a big fight, and some moment had good chances to win, but then he didn't find, was probably no win, but he didn't find a way to keep pressure. Then he, of course, then it was a draw. He wanted to avoid a draw because he would lose a match, so he lost. But then what happened? In this year, 1990, it was Jacksonville, Florida. We had 2 tournaments parallel to each other, US Open and US Invitational, played in the same hotel. So when Lasser lost to me, US Open was played, I guess, only 1 or 2 rounds. So he joined the US Open, it was allowed. He joined the US Open. It was intentionally planned so that whoever would lose in our tournament would be able to join the US Open with certain points. I think after 2 rounds, he was able to join with 1.5 points or something like that. If someone would lose in the next round of tournament, he would be able to join after 4 rounds, maybe with 2.5 out of 4, something like that. So Yasser joined US Open and won US Open. So in fact, we almost like change places.
You know, other people would say, what, to pay a third of first prize to a second or half? That would not make sense to him. But no, I'm going to hire the best second. I'm going to win the US Championship. Whatever it takes. I'll just do it, you know. Okay, 10,000 first. Okay, I'll pay 5,000 to Alex, you know. But he'll make me win the tournament. That'll be good. And so it was never a thing for him. I mean, that's what also attracted me to Lev. He was such a generous person always, you know.
I remember, and this refers to this tournament, relates to this tournament of 1990. I was going to play Nick. My first game with Nick, I played with white. And and with Nick with white, I usually have a big fight. I played certain system in Benoni with white, and Nick always plays the same sharp system with black. Sometimes I prepare something new a little bit, but usually it was the same because both Nick and I were Nick was in one way very similar to me. He always played the same openings, and he studied them very well. And I did. So when we play with Nick, say I play white, it will be always a struggle in a certain line of Benoni. With someone finding deviation maybe on move 15 or 20. Alex Sheldon, who was my coach there, because Alex decided to play in US Open, but Sheldon was a very strong player, very good theoretician, but he was a European player. He wasn't used to, not even 2 rounds a day. US Open was 1 round a day, but he didn't like really Swisses. I guess he didn't start it well. I guess he lost the game, drew, decided to withdraw. And I hired him as a coach. I told him, look, I would pay you. We were good friends. I helped him to come here. He was my guest with his wife and his wife's sister at my apartment, even when they had to stay somewhere in New York for a couple of days. And I told him, Alex, be my coach. You already helped me with your advice. And I would share with you my victory. I give you 25%. Then Max Dlugy, after Max Dlugy lost the match to me, also was helping me. But when I played with Deferman, it was second round, I think, after I won against Servan. Alex showed me a system against Benoni. I use it. The system is still good. Then later it was found ways to almost equalize. I got big advantage. Also, Nick usually liked to stand long in the opening. Nick is kind of was prone to sidepoints. Got into terrible sidepoint. He played well. He almost escaped. Almost. Probably if he had more time, he would have escaped. It was rook and game. I was much better, but I didn't play very accurately and probably let him out. But he didn't have time, so he made some mistakes. And one mistake was enough, and I won the game. And then we're supposed to play second game. And again, when I played black, we played the same line with Alekhine. And, Alekhine was always, as we discussed, for me, was kind of shaky. And maybe he would find even some improvement. And Alex told me, no, Lev, let me show you Perk opening. And it sort of looked almost like crazy, because it's one thing to show me a line in against Benoni, different line, but it seems simply still, first 7 moves the same, then go almost first lines. So I could have learned in several hours. But to play entirely different opening, I never played in my life. I knew about Pelper, but never played in my life. I probably didn't play even with Weisskind because I usually played, maybe I played with Weisskind, but not with Black. But I already had such confidence with Alex because he helped me in my last game with Serevan. First game I had myself, second game with Serevan, and especially with this first game with Defector, I was impressed. I said, fine, let's do it. Great contribution to Alex, who really did a great job for me. And later, Alex and I, and Lawrence, who is my friend and partner in my book business, Alex wrote, with my help and Elle's help, we wrote a book, Allred, which was really a great book. And even still is in demand, although it's kind of almost out of print, but still in demand. Some copies still around on Amazon and so on. And this book was so good that when we published this book, Shannon, who was at that time, it was year 2000, Shannon, who was already one of the best players in the world, like second or third, with Crenier and Kasparov, he met Alex and asked Alex to be his work with him on openings because he was so impressed by this book.
I was executive director of the U.S. Chess Federation in 1990, and we hadn't had a world championship in the U.S. For a long time. It was a very big deal. And we got that very largely through Lev's influence and connections with major U.S. sponsors and also with Garry Kasparov. It would never happen without Lev.
It was a great year, 1990, this time, as I mentioned, Soviet system was collapsing. I was working with Garry on anti-Soviet activities. Garry was going to play World Championship match in New York, which I helped organize with my student Ted Field, who contributed Garry. After seeing him for 1 hour, I said, look, what can I do? Can I have this tournament this year? He said, yes, how much I should give? Oh, I said, look, the prize fund now is to 2 million. That's okay, let's make it 3 or 4. How much for expenses? That is 2 million. Okay. I write a check for 7 million. To whom it would bank check to FIDE, of course, guaranteed by the bank, but conditional on the tournament. He would have a tournament. No, he wouldn't simply give it as a gift to FIDE. It would be held by the bank. And he did. And France also wanted to have a match, so they decided to share. But as a result, we have this match. 1990, Karpov-Kasparov in New York and then in France. Look, I was in Russia, I kind of combined teaching and playing, as many Russian grandmasters did. In some cases, it wasn't teaching, it was like assisting. Like, obviously, I wasn't teacher of Platonov, not to say Stein, I was their assistant. I wasn't a teacher of Korchnoi when I worked with Korchnoi in 79 and 80. When he was playing for World Championship, I was his assistant. So it was one thing to be us. When Kasparov played Karpov in New York in 1990, I was with Kasparov and Dlugy, and we played some games and like some openings. Obviously, I was his assistant, not his. I didn't teach him.
Lev Alburt had a tremendous impact on the way that chess was taught in the U.S. starting in the early 80s, with his books that revealed the training techniques that the Soviet Union used to produce the dominating hegemony that they had in chess from the 50s. Now, his books at that time were bestsellers.
And his books are lively. They're fun to read. They're a joy to read. So, and he's done a bunch of things with Al Lawrence as well, and Al too. I mean, he has a great style. So they were a great team. Just like there's only one Lev, there's only one Al Lawrence. He's really a very special guy. So, and deserves the attention he gets.
But it was the Lev Alburt basically 7-book chess course that laid all that out, and it did. It helped to change how chess was taught in the U.S. He went to and played and instructed at the famous Botvinnik School, and the Soviets were famous for being completely rounded players, where Americans, for example, who learned chess and learned by playing and learned by talking to other U.S., largely we were isolated at that time, players, they would have gaps in their understanding of some position, and in a way that he wouldn't have.
I mean, he's written some excellent books. I mean, I've in my academy, I have old. I mean, I would buy books from him and would give them away as prizes in my tournaments and sell them in my bookstore, and I read them myself because they're great, and still use them in some of my classes, especially some of his puzzle books, because he had a very good system.
Oh, we worked together on a number of projects. Usually I would teach the introductory players and Lev would teach the advanced players. We worked again at the Marshall Chess Club and the Manhattan Chess Club and other programs in the early 80s. In fact, I think we had 21 instructors all told at the Marshall Chess Club Institute, the Chess Institute there. And the teachers were graded, and Lev had the highest grading of using the Harvard grading system for evaluating teachers. So he was a fairly good teacher, and people really appreciated and liked him.
We had guys like Joel Benjamin take lessons from him, and Michael Wilder, strong grandmaster who became strong grandmasters, and that was, obviously that was there was a reason for why they were successful, because I think Lev helped them a lot as well.
When I came here, I worked with some players who mostly were able to pay me. Sometimes adults, sometimes parents of children. Some of them children were very gifted. One of my most promising students who really became world champion twice, it was somewhere in early 80s. His name is John Deloria. He probably was, he probably now is maybe like 30 years old, something, 35 maybe even. And his father was, I guess, from Philippines, very strong character, championship character, great talent. He became world champion, I think, under 10 and then under 12. I started working with him. He barely knew moves. Bruce Pandolfini and I, we conducted together a class at Manhattan Chess Club, maybe like 20, 30 kids. We used Roman Peltz's materials as our basis. We in fact invited Roman also to do some lessons. We divided kids into groups, like 10 and 10. And John, who was, I guess, 5 years old, he was first in the beginners group. He barely knew moves. But after it was a series of 10 lessons. But after 2 or 3 lessons, we moved him into higher group with some adults, even with some rated players. And then he was one of the best in this group. And then I began to work with him. But then when he turned, I guess, 12, he kind of lost interest in chess. I guess he moved to some science. He was a very, very bright guy. I'm sure he is successful in everything he was doing, maybe computers, maybe business, maybe anything. He would be successful in anything he would do. Great character. He could become easily chess world champion.
Well, yeah, I mean, Lev was the first grandmaster who charged $100 an hour. It was unthinkable of in the 80s, because it was a huge amount of money. To charge $100 an hour, he was not. He was so much of an outlier. You would think, like, how can you do that, right? But yet he said, look, that's my price. And that attracted a very specific clientele. It attracted very wealthy people who, like, well, it must be worth it. It must be worth it. So, and that attracted people that because his style is, he's a conversationalist. He loves to talk. He likes to talk it out. He would have lessons where he, a lot of the times, if there was some famous people, he would talk to them about, political things and this and that, and they would become friends. And a lot of his students are his friends to this day. Guys like Carl Icahn or Congressman Spitzer or Doug Hirsch, who's a big hedge fund manager and who ran the Sloan Conference for many years, which donated money to pediatric cancer. All these guys, even though they were his students, they also became his friends. And it was when Kasparov came on the scene and we saw a champion who was able to attract sponsorships because of his demeanor and the way he kind of talked about chess with a lot of vigor and energy, he was able to transform those friendships into actual, sponsorships and financial support of chess on a very large scale.
I worked for a while with George Weisskind, who was famous because of the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer, who his father wrote a book, Fred, and then they make a movie, very good movie. I worked with Josh, but he already was a master, helped him to become stronger master. But never, I guess we worked for several years. I worked with his friends, group of 3, and also worked with him individually. He was probably quite famous of my students. It was also interesting, Bruce Pandolfini passed it to me, Josh, when Josh became a master. But I think Josh, because he saw that now Josh needs a grandmaster, I'm not so sure. I think Bruce could have continued working with him, and I could be simply an extra assistant. I also had, Gata Kamsky was my student for a while when he defected, but very briefly. I rather passed him to other good coaches like Roman Djindjikashvili. And those were I also had some chess masters, like John Crenier, with whom I co-authored the book on Karyakin Castle match in New York, which we won the Best Book of the Year award.
He teaches a boy that goes to my academy, and the twin brothers. I teach one of the brothers, teaches the other privately. And at one point, he calls me up and says, "Oh, I arranged lessons for this boy with Tukmakov, and then with Ivanchuk." And who does that, right? I mean, think about it. He teaches these guys. He gets every weekly lesson, and then he says, "No, you know what? The next 2 weeks, I'm not going to be the one teaching. It's going to be Ivanchuk and then Tukmakov." I mean, awesome for the kid, awesome, but who has that generosity in the chess world that I don't know anyone else myself, So he's an inspiration. I learned from him.
But I like the most a statement from my long-time student in the 80s, Steve Friedman, who was chairman of Goldman Sachs. I worked with him every Sunday for several hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. He lived near me. I would go to his house, stay for about 4 hours, have lunch with him, with his wife, very nice lady. But Steve said the best thing about me. He had great sense of humor, and I really appreciate it. He said, then you can check it. He said, I studied with Lev Alburt for 5 years or whatever. I was a very weak player when I started. I remain very weak player now. It was great. I love it. I was a partner before. I am partner now, something like that. You can check. I like it because, it's nice to hear when people are praising you, but it's nice to hear humor. And Steve had and still has, I'm saying, kind of very well, nice, not open, but kind of subtle sense of humor. I love it. I love him. I love it. And then when I already retired around 92, 93, was mostly in my publishing business. Then United States Chess Championship was played like 50 minutes drive from New York. And I was still invited because I still had high rating. And they said, let me play. And we also had a break for 2 or 3 days. I thought, let me play. I would come home for 2 days of break. I can still work on my books. I can play. So I came. And of course, in those days, there were already computers. Not playing computers, that's 95, but computers which store information. So I realized that all my opponents know all my games with computer. And I don't remember those games myself. My only would tell me, like Gene Shafters go, Lev, it's such and such game of yours, so I simply follow your game. So I was so disgusted. I was in last place, -3. It's kind of unpleasant psychologically. Not a big deal, but a little unpleasant. So just say, it was also very unpleasant to be beaten by the opening, they played 15, 16 moves, which almost 15 moves was my own earlier game, which I don't remember. I said, okay, let me play something else. So I went back to play the Sicilian defense, which is okay. Not everyone is Karpov. Karpov was able to win against me the same game. Let Benjamin or Christiansen win against me. So I played, and I did very well. I easily drew with Joe, with Benja. Larry barely escaped against me. I won one game with Black. Eventually, I even won the last round. And against Kaidanov, nice fellow, but it was nice for me to win. He was leading the tournament. I tied for 4th, 11th place with -1, and win. In addition to the minimum, I won, I guess, $2,000. So I was very happy. Not only for $2,000 also, but also for, still was nice to finish tournament with 2 wins in a row. It was always nice.
Lev Alburt was inducted into the U.S. Chess Hall of Fame in 2002, and that would have been the second year that the World Chess Hall of Fame was open in Miami, Florida. He was inducted at the same time as a really prestigious class in U.S. chess, Donald Byrne and Walter Brown, a multi-time U.S. champion.
Yes, I was inducted to Hall of Fame. I think it was year 2003. At that time, Hall of Fame was located in Florida, in Miami, Florida. And it was a building, very nice building in the form of the tower. You can even see it on this book of mine, which you have this. Yes, it's a tower. This tower was seen from almost anywhere in the area of Miami when you come to airport in Fort Lauderdale or Miami. When you drive, you almost would see this building, very beautiful building. And this was built by Sam Samola. He had L. Lawrence, my good friend and a partner in my books, co-author, editor, many more things. And good friend, despite our political disagreements, very, very good friend. And L was one of his directors. And L decided, and Sid liked this idea, to build Chess Hall of Fame. Earlier, there was Chess Hall of Fame, some items, but they were held in UCF headquarters in New Windsor, where they were very rarely visited. Just, a small place upstate New York. And here is Miami, in the middle of a great city, great building. So he built this Hall of Fame, beautiful building.
We house the U.S. and World Chess Halls of Fame here. We don't induct people, but we house it and we promote them. And it's always so meaningful to see people come to the museum and want to know exactly where the plaques are and all of the information about the players. They're also unique. They're all being promoted for a variety of things. Some of them are for their writing, some of them are for their playing, some of them are for their contributions to the game, and Lev Alburt kind of fits all of those.
The Hall of Fame was a great place. It was a big celebration because they wanted, at this moment, at this year, they had like 2 Hall of Fame together. They had FIDE Hall of Fame, World Hall of Fame, and American Hall of Fame. So I was inducted in American Hall of Fame. Many other chess players were there. And they also in World Hall of Fame, they inducted Boris Spassky. And I was responsible for negotiating with Spassky and bringing him in. And I was able to arrange it. Spassky came with his wife. I came with my wife. My friends came. Again, Lawrence, of course, was there. Our main host. Susan Polker was there. Alexander Kostyanyuk was there. Sam Palatin was there. We had great time.
They had celebrations that lasted over 2 days. There was everything from a tournament where people could compete to see themselves in the Hall of Fame and get their name put up in the Hall of Fame. And then there were also some live chess matches with the Renaissance Society of Florida doing sword fights to reenact a chess match. And they had 2,000 people viewing it. So he's part of this huge event, and he and Some other chess players, including Susan Polgar and Alexander Kosteniuk, did a simul to kind of promote chess as well. At the dinner, he and Boris Spassky gave a lot of speeches, and he noted that it was really nice to be inducted the same year as his friend Spassky.
His legacy in American chess is certainly as a great champion. His legacy in the Cold War chess, of course, is that he was the only GM to turn his back on all the perks that you could get in the Soviet Union, but he wanted to be free. Now, in terms of U.S. chess, I believe that the origins of some of the origins of the great chess culture that we now enjoy goes back to Lev making the connections, both political and with business people, and knowing how that all worked to bring world championships in 1990 and 1995 to the U.S. Also, his publishing raised the level of chess teaching.
Лев Альбурт, несомненно, талантливый, выдающийся шахматист и гроссмейстер.
Lev Alburt is undoubtedly a great, talented, and outstanding grandmaster. This is why he is now well remembered by chess lovers in Ukraine. A 1975 chess magazine noted that Alburt was an interesting and outstanding chess player because he never played a cliché game. He played creatively. He played seldom played openings such as the Volga Gambit or Benco Gambit. He was a tactical player, and fans always enjoy tactical play. These are some of the reasons he attracted fans by his style. I should add that only 2 players before Alburt won the Ukrainian Championship 3 times, and no one has done it since Alburt.
So it's great that you chose him as your topic, because I think it's a wonderful topic, and a wonderful person who always looks for compromise, never goes into no, this is my position and that's it, everyone perish. No, never. And so just very kind person generally.
He was famous as a one of the only top tier grandmasters that would really work with players who weren't yet masters. So in that way, he brought a lot of improvement in, how to teach chess. So he's got a lasting impact as a champion player, as an important educator through his books, and in helping to grow our whole culture by bringing championships here and bringing back an interest in chess in the U.S. Since it had peaked and went downhill from '72. So a very important step in our chess culture, and a great contribution and a great legacy.
Well, I think he gets very high marks, and he certainly acquired a prominent place in chess history, American chess history, but in chess history.
And Alburt always played the sharpest, most complicated, and those were his openings. Nowadays, you could go to your computer and type in your opponent's name, if you're a grandmaster, and you're like, oh, that grandmaster plays this opening, and he only plays this variation. You get your 6 laptops with 6 different engines to look at it for 3 days while you go out shopping.
Personally, I think of him not only as an outstanding chess player, but also an outstanding man. He is intelligent and kind, very friendly. When I interviewed him, I felt he was really a great man. When the book is written on Lev Alburt, he will be remembered as an outstanding chess player and a great person, and this is how he was remembered in Ukraine.
He always supported me. We're still friends, and we're still, he's part of my school, Chess Max Academy. He's a coach on my roster, and we work closely with some kids that he teaches and who go to my school, and he's been very, very good friend for many, many, many years. It's amazing, how stable he is as a human being, how solid. Even though we had different opinions on some issues over the years, it never really phased our relationship.
Yeah, he was U.S. champion several times, U.S. Open champion. Those are good things. But But a lot of, other people have become U.S. champions and U.S. Open champions that don't have the legacy that Lev has because he made two significant contributions. And one of them, the defection, the other one, the writing. So he's been good for America.
And this might be of interest for your viewers. I don't have great chessing memory. In fact, I recently talked to Boris Gulko, a good friend of mine, who now lives in Israel, used to live in the United States. And we were very reminiscing about some tournament, young masters tournament I used to play somewhere in 1968 or 69. It was in Batumi, which used to be Russia. I remembered even a single game. And I asked Boris, by the way, did you play in this tournament? I couldn't remember. I remember other people, not Boris. And Boris told me, Lev, not only I did play in this tournament, but I played with you. And we played such and such opening, and I won. And it was this, do you want me to dictate the entire game? And believe me, I do it from my head. I didn't prepare. I just called him for something, for some other reason. And I was not surprised, but, he has great memory. Bobby Fischer used to have great memory, photographic memory. Garry Kasparov, when he was young, probably still, maybe it's not the same, but when he was young, he had real photographic memory. He remembered pages. He remembered what was on each page. And my memory was, well, I wouldn't say my chessing memory was not really bad, but it was kind of mediocre. It was good enough for me to be a very strong grandmaster. In fact, it could be enough for me to be even world champion if I had other talents, because I'll tell you a brief story. I played with Boris Spassky, another very good friend of mine, in U.S. Championship in 1985 in Fort Lauderdale. It was U.S. Open, but it's open, so Boris played there. Eventually, Boris tied for first with Yasser Serevan. So other players were kind of surprised because they saw us analyzing, and they saw us all time looking in our score sheets. Two great players, world champion, couldn't remember moves which they played just a few minutes ago. And so what we decided, I said, okay, which move I would do now? I probably would move rook c8. And then let's move rook c8 and see what happened. I moved rook c8 and it really happened that I was right. It was the move I made and so on. I'm just saying that not only me, but the great Boris Spassky, great world champion, had relatively poor chess memory. So this is, so in chess memory is important. But exceptional chess memory is helpful, but not that important.